views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. You'd never know it from examining a list of Bronx elected officials, but the Bronx does have its own Republican Party. And they approached us after the borough president's State of the Borough address and last week's show with the borough president and asked if they could offer a rebuttal to the speech and a different point of view on the Bronx. We, of course, accepted that request, and tonight the Bronx Republicans will offer you their vision. The phones are open, and you can call in with questions or comments to 718-960-7261. You could also email them to bronxtalk@bronxnet.org or post them on our Facebook page, and we read those on the air during a future edition of our program. But for the here and now, it is the Bronx GOP Vice Chair, Michael Rendino. Mr. Rendino, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you for having us on. We appreciate it.
And the Communications Director is J.C. Polanco. Good evening, J.C. Welcome back. You've been on the show
Yes,
before.
Well, good evening. Thank you for having me.
Gentlemen, let's start here. Bronxites, and I don't think it's any secret to anybody, have had a demonstrated interest in immigrant rights and the raising of the minimum wage, on rent stabilization. The Bronx has had a large number of uninsured people as far as health care goes, all issues that sync up with fundamental Democratic Party values and agendas. How can a party that has pushed back on those very things, the Republican Party, hope to have appeal in the borough of the Bronx?
You know, first of all, Gary, again, thanks for having us. The Bronx, some of your viewers may not know this, but the Bronx has the highest percentage of Democrats than any other county across the country. That's a big deal.
I've alluded to it in my introduction.
Now, we're talking about over 6,000 counties, so we're at a disadvantage as it is, and that's because of many reasons. I think that the party nationally for many decades has ignored the interests of many people in the Bronx. But there's something to be said about some of the issues that you have brought up. The assumption is that those are Democratic Party principles or party issues or things that the Democratic Party only cares about. And that's just not true. The Republican Party does care about those issues. It cares about employment. It cares about education. It cares a lot about crime. And to every issue that you did mention, the Republicans do offer a counterpoint. You mentioned immigration. We have an issue with immigration. The National Party is making it very difficult for us in the Bronx to be able to connect with many Bronxites as they try to figure out a way where there's a path to legalization, which is really what many Bronxites want to hear. The National Party has taken a very conservative position on some of those issues, and it makes our job here in the Bronx a lot more difficult.
So you're saying that your vision of what Republicanism is, or at least what you'd like to bring to the Bronx, is different from the party that wants to hold up funding for Homeland Security because they want to stop the president from pushing his immigration package
Clearly,
together.
that's the issue. You know, like the Democrats and Republicans, we differ. You know, the Republicans from the Bronx and New York are not the same Republicans that you're going to find out in Oklahoma. So our job is to educate the voters about how important the differences are and to give us an opportunity to be able to represent them in government.
Let's stay with, and Mike will let you in on the conversation in a moment. Since we started on immigration, it's New York Republicans in the Senate who certainly have pushed back on the DREAM Act, and it would be hard to say that these are not New Yorkers who are disagreeing with Bronxites. These are New York senators.
Well, you know, the reality is that the Democrats had control of the Senate for many years, actually for a whole 2 years. And guess what? We didn't see marriage equality come through. We didn't see the DREAM Act there. So it's nice for the Democrats to now lob bombs at the Republicans and say, you're not doing anything about it. But the reality is that the DREAM Act is a very sensitive issue. And this is important. Across the state, the DREAM Act is very unpopular. The idea that you can take taxpayer funds and give them to children that are here, or students that are here illegally, and say now you have financial aid. The reality is that many people across the state find this to be reprehensible, considering that many of their own students that are here legally are not going to be able to get that aid. Now, I may agree with the DREAM Act. That's my personal position, but I understand where the parties representing different interests, Gary.
Without breaking that down, and I want to bring Mr. Rendino into the general question about where the Republican Party stands. But of course, anybody born in these United States is an American citizen.
And they will qualify for TAP, Gary.
Let's just talk in general. So if in fact that you say, well, we're not in sync with maybe the most radical end of the Republican Party nationally, why not just have a conservative wing of the Democratic Party? In other words, what you're saying is we just have a different point of view. There are certainly more conservative Democrats in the Bronx. Why not have that? And maybe you'd be more effective at getting some of the people to be elected as well as some of the agendas across.
Well, I think we always talk about inclusiveness, and I think the Bronx Republican Party is a very inclusive party. We have people with all kinds of beliefs. Some support immigration, some are against immigration. We don't...
Illegal immigration.
Illegal immigration, I apologize. We don't say they can't be a part of the party. We are a big tent Republican Party, and we allow inclusiveness.
Mm-hmm. So then why hasn't it stuck to the point of actually not having even one elected official? I mean, who was the last one? Was Guy Villela was the last elected Republican. So if what you say is true, one would think that Bronxites would, like magnets, say, well, you know what, we're dissatisfied with the Democratic status quo, we don't feel like we have inclusiveness, then why are, if what you say is true, why aren't they flocking to you?
Twofold in two issues. One, the national brand, as JC alluded to earlier. An urban Republican is very different than an anti-government conservative from a very red state, and Bronx Republican is very different from a red state senator in some of his politics and policies, and we have to distinguish between those differences. The second thing is we've had a bad track record, and we're the first ones to say it here in the Bronx Republican Party. We've had our share of scandals, just like the Democrats have, and we've had to rebuild from that and start over, and that's what we've been doing for the last 2 years.
So again, I guess I'm going to go back to the same question that I asked. If you're saying that we are different, and maybe JC, you can clarify that because he's had a whack at it, that we are different from the most radical wings of the National Republican Party, yet wouldn't it be better if you would say, well, you know what, and more realistic, we could still get our agendas through, our political agendas through, if we called ourselves Democrats and formed a stronger conservative wing of Democratic Party?
Well, Gary, you're absolutely right. I mean, that would be the easy answer. It's true. I mean,
I made it sound so simple.
It would be easy for us to just decide to become conservative Democrats. But the reality is that there are so many principles of the Republican Party that we agree with. I'll give you an example of what I mean. The Republican Party really believes in economic empowerment. It believes in lower taxes. It believes in that this is a country of laws and that's not negotiable. And I think that we have seen in New York City what a New York City Republican can do when we see the rebirth of the city through former Mayor Rudy Giuliani. And quite frankly, we saw a lot of it under Mayor Bloomberg early in his tenure. So to look at the New York City Republican Party and look at the things that we believe in fundamentally that unite us, it's very different from the approach that we have seen from more of the mainstream Democrats across the city. Now, you've asked about why is it so difficult for us to get an elected official in the Bronx, considering that the last elected was Senator Guy Villela back in 2004. There are a lot of reasons for that. As I mentioned at the beginning, the party has ignored the plight of many communities in the Bronx for decades. In the 80s,
the party meaning
the National Party, and quite frankly, even Senator Villela, Senator Calandra before, they were very parochial with their districts and didn't make it so that we had a bench where we can grow candidates from. So today we find ourselves in a very tough position. One, the largest percentage of Democrats in any other county in the country. Two, we find ourselves with no elected officials and no real district in the county where we can have a viable race, with the exception of maybe one or two, considering the daunting numbers of redistricting. This is some inside baseball. But redistricting happens every 10 years. And if you look at the districts, Gary, the districts are very lopsided, Democrat to Republican, so that we can, with absolute certainty, determine that a Democrat will 100% of the time win a race in September.
So then where are you going with this?
Well, I
mean, basically, you're
No, I
saying that, you know what, we don't agree with the party. We have something to offer.
No, we don't
the
agree
Bronx.
with the extreme elements,
The
Gary.
extreme elements of the party. Certainly, I understand that with the foundations. We don't, you know, we've had problems with districting. We don't have the numbers. What are your expectations? What would you like to see realistically, maybe Mr. Rendino, in the future in the Bronx? What do you see? What is going to happen now that will be different, that will appeal to more Bronxites than you have before?
That's a great question.
Okay, well, it's going to take time. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be done overnight. It's going to take grassroots reaching out, which we've been doing. It's going to take community service. You know, there are extremes in both parties, too. It's not just the conservative branch of the Republican Party. The liberal branch of the Democratic Party is just as extreme. And unfortunately, the middle class is being tuned out by the extremes of both party and liberal elitists that just aren't hearing our concerns.
Give me some concerns. Let's talk specific, because we deal obviously with issues on this show all the time. Give me some specific issues that you think Bronxites would, you know, gravitate to you if you had a chance to show them or lay them out.
Sure. I mean, one of the biggest things of the Republican Party are economic development, entrepreneurship. We believe in economic freedom, personal responsibility, and accountable government. These are the things that we're looking for.
These are good catchwords. We had a rather stirring dialogue with the borough president last week about his vision, and one of those visions, I think, would be a Republican vision, and that is bringing in big businesses, bringing in box stores. That is what has gone on in small towns all over America. Isn't that the kind of economic development that you would support based on the agendas of the Republican Party?
Sure, we would support that, but it needs to be more. It needs to be across the board. We can't just target it to certain areas. We need to target it throughout the whole city. We need to make the New York business environment more friendly to business. We need less regulations, and we need lower taxes. We're not saying we need no taxes, because that's insane.
The economics of the lower taxes is certainly something that nationally we could talk about. We could, you know, again, you know, I know we want to talk locally, but, you know, this idea of lower taxes leads to economic development. I mean, the catchphrase right now is look at the state of the economy under the last two Democratic presidents versus the last three Republican presidents. And clearly, President Obama has rescued, at least to some degree, the economy from the way that he inherited it from George Bush, who was for lower taxes.
Gary, to that point, you're going back to national issues. I think that we can, believe it or not, give credit to the House Republicans for a lot of that economic growth. And I know it's a difficult sell here in the Bronx, but a lot of the times that the House Republicans worked very closely with the president to secure those Bush tax cuts for another term. And many argue that that was one of the reasons why we stirred the economy. But to your earlier point about local Bronx issues, you know, kudos to the borough president. I think he's doing a very good job bringing jobs into the borough, and he's bringing over $1 billion in investment. And I saw your program, over 15,000 jobs. I think that's very good. But I have to tell you, we are still #1 in the state in unemployment. So there has to be, and I know he has a very tough job. I mean, no one's going to be here to badmouth Borough President Diaz. But I have to tell you, when you have the highest unemployment across the state, that means 62 counties. We're #1 on that list year after year. We're home now to the second.
So what do you do as opposed to all the, I mean, we could list his agendas.
No,
what would
I
you
can't.
do, and what would a Republican, either candidate for borough president or for city council or in any one of the other offices, say about that issue that would change a direction of what's going on
Gary,
in this borough?
we had a candidate for borough president. I have to talk him out of it because it's going to be a daunting race, one. Two, I think that some of the things you mentioned with the box stores, I think, are short-sighted. For example, why don't we have a Walmart in the Bronx? Why is it that we were only limited to just a specific project for the Kingsbridge Armory, although it's fantastic that it's an ice rink? But when you look at the amount of jobs that we would be able to bring with a real major box store that just so happened to be non-union, we could definitely help our numbers increase in job growth and bring the Bronx out of that #1 spot where we've been for quite some time.
I want to take some phone calls. I don't want to get bogged down on the question of Walmart, but Walmart has closed Main Street in just about every small
But
town
Gary,
in America.
Gary, you have purchasing power that we would be able to give Bronxites, and then you have jobs that you'd be able to give people that don't have them.
Are those the jobs that are going to build the borough?
It'll give the jobs that people need to build the skills necessary to move up and get other jobs.
Is
But
that,
we need to bring
is the history of that, is that what's happening in small town America?
What we
right
have
now?
right now are many people that don't get to work and are staying home collecting entitlements when they could get some job skills that'll be beneficial.
Let's go to it's George. I don't have his location, so I don't know where George is from. But where are you from, George? I can barely. There you go.
Hi,
George.
Gary. I'm here. I'm calling from Bronxtalk.
Okay. Hi, George.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, there's a lot of hypocrisy in a lot of this. I mean, the last two mayors, especially Mayor Giuliani and then Mayor Bloomberg, who went from the Republican to independent, and from Democrat to Republican to independent.
Right.
Regardless, I mean, left the city in much more economic disparities. It's become much more expensive to live here for the average working person.
Okay.
Hard
to deny.
Have always been at the local level against unions, which have been responsible for having contributing to good living wages with good paying jobs. And those jobs left because they were outsourced. Mm-hmm. And they were outsourced because they were deregulated. Mm-hmm. So you can't divorce the national from the local when it comes to the Republican Party. There's no way you can do it.
Mm-hmm. And you're saying because philosophically, George, because you're saying philosophically, Walmart, using that as good an example as any, you think unions have been a help to developing the economy of everyday Bronxites.
Well, I would like to.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I guess even Walmart recently had to raise their minimum
their
pay scale.
wage, right?
And that pay scale push.
Right. I don't know if I guess we did lose him. So you want to respond to that?
Walmart real quick. You know, Walmart always gets a bad rap. They've raised their wages to $9 an hour, way above the minimum wage. What they do offer is products and services cheaper than anyone else can. I know you were against the Gateway project, the related project over in the Yankee Stadium when it happened. But when it did happen, it changed the whole neighborhood. People had access to goods and services that couldn't travel to BJ's up in Westchester. They were able to go with shopping carts down River Avenue from 161st Street and get it. And they're not terrible to their employees. My uncle has worked for Walmart for 17 years. He has stock in the company. He has a decent wage, and he's made a living off it.
Mm-hmm. JC, reacted when the caller talked about unions. So what was it?
No, I think, again, we have such diversity in the Republican Party that we have very strong union Republicans. So to blast the Republican Party as being anti-union is just not true. I think what we're looking at as far as unions are, how are unions having a stronghold on jobs and keeping jobs out? It's nice when the union guy says, I have a job, but what about the 10 others that can't get a job because the borough president, or the people that are in charge of bringing these jobs and say you can't have a job unless it's a union job, or unless you get paid $15 an hour for an entry-level job, you're keeping the Bronx at the highest unemployment in the state. Now, that's just one of the issues that we have. But if you look at down the list, there's so many things that I think we can look at the Democrats and say, what are you doing about it? Because quite frankly, Gary, the Bronx Democrats, and I love many of them, have a monopoly on the political process. They have all the elected officials. Every race is decided in September, and there's just no way to break it right now, considering the fact that we have so much work to do ahead of us.
Let's bring on Mark from Pelham Parkway, who often calls in about political issues. Hello, Mark. How are you? Do we have Mark? And I know if we had him, I would hear him because he's generally louder than not. No? All right, we're going to have to find him again. Are you there, Mark? Is that you? I don't know. Nope. All right, guess not. Let's talk about this, go back to the idea of jobs in the Bronx. And one of the things that John Graney, who's the chair of the Bronx Republican Party, put out an op-ed piece against the Fresh Direct project, which is creating jobs. You like the Fresh Direct project? You like it? You don't like it?
Well, Fresh Direct, it's a very complicated deal. It is a symbol of crony capitalism at its worst. Who's to say that this individual company should get all these perks? Why shouldn't we level the playing field and allow it so that everyone gets these perks? Who should decide that one company or another gets these perks? We need to get lower regulations and, again, cheaper taxes. I know you said I hate to sound like I'm hitting it over the head, but it's true.
Well, so let me ask you about that Fresh Direct. So you think it's something that you don't like. What did you do? What did the Bronx Republicans do? Did you partner with the people in the South Bronx, try to convince them that you were on their side? I mean, if you're trying to build a party, one would think you would have gone out and made a lot of friends down there. I'm not aware that I heard anybody from the Bronx Republican Party speak at a hearing, appear at a community board meeting. So on one hand, you say, well, we like this, and you come on TV and tell us that this is what you want to see. On the other hand, you had a topic and a whole group of people in the community. I never heard anything other than that one op-ed piece in the newspaper.
Well, it's tough to stay in the whole borough. I mean, that happened in one part of the Bronx. It wasn't a part of the Bronx that I personally live in or work in, but it doesn't mean we're not interested in it. We support Fresh Direct in the fact that they do provide a decent service, but no one's to say that they're still going to exist in 10 years. No one's to say that their community benefit agreement is legally binding and that the jobs they say they're going to create are concrete.
In a way, I'm not debating the Fresh Direct thing. I'm just saying that on one hand, you're saying, well, the Democratic Party in the Bronx is, monopolistic. JC said we have no way in. I'm saying, like any grassroots campaign, if you have an issue that you believe in that is contrary to what your party has laid out, why wouldn't you take every opportunity, regardless of whose neighborhood it is, and say, look, this is how we're going to build our coalition for the next time we're going to run somebody, for example, to run against Melissa Mark Viverito, who's in that district, for example.
Well, I have no comment on the Fresh Direct. We have diversity in our party and diversity in opinion.
So you don't have it. Okay,
but I have to tell you that this is just one of those issues where I think you make a great point, Gary. And I think you have to understand that a lot of us have different opinions regarding the Fresh Direct.
Okay, that is fair. I think we do have Mark from Pelham Parkway back. Mark, how are you?
Hey, Gary, do you have me now?
We do.
Oh, hooray. Hey, good.
What do you got?
Okay, couple of things. One, George Bush inherited a surplus. By the time he was done with America, he put us into bankruptcy with a war that should have never happened. That reflects on all Republicans, whether you want to admit it or not. The other thing, why does everybody keep accepting that $9 and $10 with a Walmart store is a good living? Do any of these gentlemen make $9 or $10 an hour? I think they make a lot more.
Okay.
Number three, why is it that the Republicans fight against the Affordable Care Act so much when the biggest sponsors, the ones who fight the most, get the most money from insurance companies? Every civilized country on this planet, including every senator, state senator, government person, gets affordable health care given to them. In every country that is civilized, Canada, France, England, Germany, Spain, list, has national health care. In the United States, doesn't have health care because every insurance company still supports a Republican and contributes to their things. So if these gentlemen don't think it reflects on them, it does, because you are the same pariah that what you have across the country. Come up with better ideas.
I haven't been called a pariah in a while, Dan.
Thank you
so
Mark.
much for that.
Go ahead. I don't know how many of those issues we can
I didn't really
address.
hear anything he said after about the George Bush thing and the deficit. You know what? When George Bush, he wasn't the best president, but no one asked for 9/11. That changed the whole plight of his presidency. It changed the way things were. It changed the way this country. Was Iraq the right thing? Probably not. Was I supportive of the time of it? Yes. But then again, when he had the surge, I was against the surge. And sure enough, he ended up being right. We ended up leaving Iraq, and then ISIS has grown there.
Did you want to respond to some of the things, among the things, which is what we were talking about before, and that is, Walmart is offering $9 an hour. That is not the minimum wage. That may be above the minimum wage, but that's not a living wage for people in the Bronx or people anywhere, really.
Yeah, Gary, that's not fair. When I mentioned Walmart, I mentioned that as an example of jobs that could come to our borough that are not coming in because they're not union or for whatever other political reason. Now, the caller, Mark, mentions what does $9 or $10 an hour do? I'll tell you this. When you're making $0 an hour in your home, getting zero skills, and someone says, hey, I have an opportunity here where you could get some skills, getting to work on time, learning some time management responsibilities, learning that entry-level stuff that is important to a new employee, well, I think that's something that we should look into and figure out how we can translate that into jobs for the Bronx. Now, that's just one of many things. We have issues in the Bronx that are, even though the borough president, in my opinion, is doing a very good job bringing jobs in and along with other elected officials, but Gary, let's not forget that we have crime issues in parts of the Bronx that don't compare to other parts at all. I mean, we have high crime rates.
How would you address those issues as opposed
Absolutely.
to what you see
The biggest
right now?
mistake we saw with the Democrats last year was ending stop, question, and frisk. Stop, question, and frisk eliminated over 60,000
Although
illegal
crime
weapons.
is still down.
No, that's
Those
not true.
numbers-
Shootings are up. Shootings are up now, much more than last year, and shootings were up last year as well. Well, stop, question, and frisk eliminated 60,000 illegal weapons from our streets. Where were the Democrats in the Bronx regarding? We know that Joel Rivera and Jimmy Vaca voted the right way on this issue, but since then, we have elected officials in the areas that are plagued with crime asking for more police. So that's something to think about.
As we get a chance to wrap this up, I'll give you each a chance. Give me a vision, a specific vision, either a project or something you would like to see that would force change and also help your party grow so that people, aside from being on TV and getting a chance to talk about your issues, people would gravitate to the Bronx Republicans. Well, I'll give you a chance as well.
I think obviously you know what we stand for, but I think what we need to do is we need to concentrate on very specific areas of the Bronx. We need to see growth. I personally own a business near Yankee Stadium. I've seen nothing happen near the Yankee Stadium.
And what would you like to see?
What I'd like to see is someone take the lead. I'd like to see a market study. We tried getting funding. I'm a member of the community board, and I sit on the bid over there. We tried getting funding for a market study.
We could have this dialogue a long time. Should that market or shouldn't that marketing study have been done when they built the new stadium? Seems to me now you're doing it after the fact. And maybe I was right when I said way back when that wasn't the way to do it. And doing a study of the entire region for the benefit of the entire region might be a better way to do it.
Absolutely.
All right. And your last 30 seconds.
Okay, Gary, voter turnout is at an all-time low. We have less than 20% turnout in the last elections. The Bronx would be best served with a two-party system. I think even Democrats would agree. I think we'd be more valuable as a Bronx when we have two parties competing each other and arguing the ideas to get the votes of the people.
Certainly for me and what I do, I'd like to have two people here and have that dialogue. How are you going to go from where you are now to having viable candidates so that when they call and say, Gary, do you want to do a debate? I can say, well, let's really bring people on who are substantive people who really know the issues and can have that debate.
Well, Gary, that begins with the candidate. The candidate has to connect with the voters, but I think it's very important. This is where we get left off. The Bronxites have to give this an opportunity. They cannot continue just voting down party line without regard of who the candidates are. They're parts of the Bronx, Gary. This is the reality.
Okay,
that will vote down the line regardless of who the Republican is, and that's not fair, and actually it works against the issues that we have in the
Mike
Bronx.
Rendino, J.C. Polanco will continue this dialogue as we can, and we look forward to having your candidates here. As you know, we never turn them down. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary.
Folks, if you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org or put them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. Please make sure to like the Bronx Talk Facebook page, and you can check out our archives at bronxnet.org. You'll find Bronx Talk on the lower right navigation bar. Our producer usually is Dahlia Gonzalez. She couldn't be here tonight. Thanks to Helen and Bianca and Shirley and everybody else who pitched in, the cast of thousands. We'll see you next week.